Shelley Winter Show, live, local, topical, and relevant. So, as for those of you just joining us, I went to Selma, Alabama. Every time, I think it's the second weekend in March, they do recreate or commemorate the crossing of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which is also called in the history books Bloody Sunday. And went again this year. Had a good time, had a wonderful time on the bus. Met a bunch of great young people, bunch of people my age. Shout out to Dr. Sam Sharibi of Emory University, Latron Price, Miss Brenda, who is our organizer, who is on the bus with us. She's with the SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Committee, and she was on the bus with us. And Dory Henry, who is my seatmate, actually, Magic Mike. She is chief of staff for Senator Donzella James. And so so it's a great time. Will Voigt, who is the leader of the students at Emory University, shout out to all of them, made the trip very good and very informative. One of the things that I talked about, there were a lot of people during this trip who were talking about the narrative of the day about erasing history, people not wanting to teach history, and there's a lot to go back and forth on that. There really is. There are efforts to take out certain parts of history. In Alabama, as a matter of fact, Kay Ivey has stripped a lot of the civil rights movement out of the history books. I mean, this is documented in a resolution. Like, you could read it yourself. So I can understand that, quite honestly. I can understand why you wouldn't want to tell children what their grandparents might have participated in. Completely. Think about it. Because you're on the wrong side of history. You know, Democrats talk about being on the right side of history a lot. Back then, if you were against integration, if you were for, if you didn't say anything about the bombing of a church on Sunday morning during Sunday school, killing 4 children, if you did not say something about that, you were part of the problem. So I can understand someone saying, we don't want to really raise this issue too much. Because at the end of the day, little Johnny now is sitting around saying, well, Grandma, what did you say? What did you do? And, of course, 99% of all grandmas in Alabama would say, well, child, I told him it wasn't right. Everybody would, right? Just like everybody marched with Dr. King. When we see polls that say the vast majority of people thought it was too radical, but now everybody marched with Dr. King. It's the same thing. It's just, people are people. There's nothing you can really do about it. But one of the things that I say about this history thing is I'm not reliant upon someone else to teach me my history. That's not their job. My job is to know the history all the way around. And history is relative. Let's be honest. I just told you why in Alabama. Why if you're in Alabama and you're a grandmother, if you're Kay Ivey, the governor, or her children, her mom, or whatever, whomever it is, you would not want people to learn that you probably stood around and watched people just get slaughtered because you didn't want them to be treated fairly or to even vote. Something as simply as voting. You probably would want to hide that from your own families. So history is really relevant, right? At the same time, it's not the same for everybody. China, Japan, Russia, Germany, all teach the same World War II, but it does have a different perspective. It does come from a different perspective. Our soldiers are not the greatest generation in Russia. But as a matter of fact, we had nothing to do with World War II. We came in too late. The Russians did everything to win World War II from the Nazis, according to the Russians. So history is fairly relative. The facts are the same. The facts, there was a war. Now, how you interpret that war, how you interpret how it started, how it finished, everything, that's all in the eyes of the beholder. And so I don't rely on someone else to tell me my history. I know the Winter, Lockhart, Phillips, Purville history in this country. And it was told to me by family members, blood family members, coming from people I can trust about the history of our family. So I'm not going to rely on the Smiths to come tell me what happened with the Purvilles and the Lockharts and the Winters in this country. I'm not going to rely on someone else to teach me my history. And I think one of the things that I see that's happening in this country now, because I heard this all weekend, is they're trying to erase this history. You can't erase history. You can't. But you must be reliant upon yourselves to keep the history going so people remember it. Remember, there's the line, the famous line, if you forget the history, you're doomed to repeat it. And no one wants to repeat this history, but it doesn't mean that you allow someone to wipe it away. And even if they do, they should not be able to, because you keep the history of your own self, of your own experiences in this country. And that's what the lesson here is. I've never seen Asians running around saying, we're not in the history books. I've never seen Hispanics, we're not in the history books. I've never seen the Jewish people, we're not in the history books. Because they're reliant upon themselves to teach their own families the history, so their own families never forget. That's the lesson that I learned this weekend. But the other lesson that I learned this weekend goes back to who teaches the history. If you believe this country is racist and white supremacist and is filled with, or not filled with, but half the country, the Republicans don't like you because they're Republicans, and they don't like you because of the color of your skin. If you believe that, then you shouldn't really be relying on them to teach you your history. It's kind of illogical to say, hey, stop taking us out of the history books. Because if you believe they're a certain way, I don't believe they are, but if you believe they are, then you shouldn't be reliant upon them to teach history. And if you do believe they're taking away history and removing history from the history books writ large, and everything about African Americans' contribution to this country are being ripped out of the history books, and you believe that this party, the Republican Party, and conservatives by and large are racist and white supremacists, then you should really be for school choice, because then you control what your children learn. You see, you can't say on the one hand, they're taking our history out of the history books, but I want the public schools still run by the government. It doesn't make any sense. This is where I say we don't listen to each other. We don't even, many times we don't even listen to ourselves. If someone came to me and said, hey, Shelley, they're taking black history out of the history books. Really? Wow, that's horrible. What do we do? Well, they want to pass school choice where the money follows the child. Yeah, well, then why don't we take that money, put our child in our own schools, and teach the history? That's a good idea. But no, you have people saying on the one hand, hey, they're taking history out of the history books. We got to fight it. Well, let's take school choice. No, that's stealing money from the public schools. You mean the public schools that are taking history from the history books? I'm sorry. Sometimes I make too much sense. We'll be right back. Shelley Winters Show.